Alright, so when it comes to FM synths, there's a lot of different tones that you can dial in. And most of the time, I'm a fan of either the more bubbly sounds or some other type of light variation of FM, in the sense that I'm personally not a fan of the more darker, deeper, more grittier type of sounds. But that is exactly what I have for you today. And as you can hear, we get a really cool, nice gritty effect, as well as this nice stretching effect over here and over here. And all of this is actually made possible by the ICANN kick waveform over here, which is being used as our FM modulator. And all that we're really doing is we're changing the wavetail position over time, as well as changing the FM amount with the velocity over here. And all we have done is use the macro, as you can see through the automation, to just dial in the tone that we want. And of course the velocity is also used, which is actually randomized by Rhythmizer over here. It is a little bit hard to read for you, but I believe this is the velocity, and you can see that we have turned the random up over here. We're also changing the gate length, and you can see that we're introducing some slight longer notes. This is just a basic setup so that we have a nice random rhythm going. So overall the patch is very, very simple. But this works because the ICANN kick waveform is a nice transition from a semi-complex waveform into a little bit more of a complex one. So if we look at the waveform while it is actually playing, we get something that looks like this. You can also see that the sync is used over here to create that warping effect, but I'll talk about that later. The main thing that I wanted you to notice is that we have this continuously morphing waveform that becomes more and more complex. Of course, right here in terms of where it is fairly simple looking. But if we go up more and more, we can see that the waveform basically needs more detail over here. And then I believe the highest modulation is somewhere over here. So you can see that there's quite a lot going on in the beginning over here. So you can imagine that with what we know about FM, how we're changing the phase over time, there's more changes happening to the phase. So here we get a little bit more of a gritty texture. If you don't know exactly what that means, then maybe check out this video over here. But all that is important for us to know right now is that the more complex the waveform looks, the more complex the FM tone is going to be. So that is just what we're making use of when we're automating the macro. And then you can see I actually experimented with a bandpass filter. If we turn this on, you can see the remains of that over here. Because what I wanted to do is I wanted to introduce a little bit more of a change to it. But what I found that works really well is the sync. Because the sync, if we look at it, it is basically just a rise in pitch. You can imagine the waveform going faster and faster. So that's basically what the pitch is doing. But it's neat because it's this almost morphing effect of the pitch. Of course, it's not exactly the pitch, because the whole fun part about the sync is that at this point, even though we're in half the wave cycle, it just re-triggers from the start. So it's almost like every individual wave cycle of this sound is treated as a sample, and that is then stretched to actually implement a pitching effect into it, which is of course determined by the percentage that you set over here. If you set it at 2% exactly, you're going to get an octave. And in that case, it is going to perfectly re-trigger. But in the cases in between, it is obviously not going to perfectly do that. And that means that we get a little bit of a different sound to it, as if we were to just pitch it up normally. But then the effect of this sync over here on the overall FM setup is going to be very similar to what changing the pitch would do basically over here. Of course, if you're going to go in whole octaves over here, you don't have that smooth transition. You're just going to get the whole percentages in here. So if you want to emulate that closely, you would use something like the pitch. But again, there's going to be that difference between this is going to reset every wave cycle, and this is just going to continuously speed up or slow down the waveform. Now, honestly, I haven't experimented enough with using the sync versus the pitch to actually tell you what the differences are. I just thought that this was a neat method to do the same thing. There's also the other benefit that if you wanted to, you could use the windows. So that kind of smooths out the waveform. So you get something like this instead, which can give some other cool FM tones. But you can hear that there's something cool happening at the full sync where it really gets that kind of sliding pitching effect if you move it up and down. And to be honest, when it comes to creating patches like this is not something that I necessarily know in advance. When it comes to sound designing these ideas for you guys, I just get to experiment a lot, especially during this month. But of course, also when I'm producing, I get to experiment a lot like this, and I hope that you guys do that as well. Because these kind of interactions, in my opinion, you can only really find if you just keep experimenting a lot, and that is what I want to encourage with this series, is to show you that a lot of experimentation can lead to a whole new idea in terms of sound designing. Now, the people that watch my shorts will know that I recently started a new production. I've been featuring that heavily in shorts. Now, some of the fills and my tracks take an hour to make, and you can really notice that in the end result.
Maybe I was got a bit too far.
And that production really is just a direct result of me doing this Sound Design September thing. Because I get to experiment so much with sound design, I learned so much about the sound design that I actually could start this track. And of course, that is also the track from which this kick and bass is from. And a lot of the other sounds are from as well, so stuff like this. For those wondering why I didn't give away the MIDI for this one, it is because that is actually a part of an active production of mine. And there's going to be a time where I'm actually going to cover that production in an actual video as well. And then what I'll do is I'll upload that project file onto my Patreon. Of course, that is also where I'm uploading all of the patches for Sound Design September. So if you want to support me and get all of that great content in return, that is a way to do it. But now let's get into actually doing something similar. And what I want to do is I want to show you a slightly different way of experimenting with this kind of stuff. Because I know that Vital is actually very good for this. Because I recently discovered all of the different factory wavetables that are in here. As you can see, I've all added them to my favorites. Right now, my favorites is just the factory wavetables that I have. But there are some really cool ideas in here that sit really nicely in that sweet spot of simplicity versus complexity that you often want in an FM modulator. So for example, this quad saw over here, you can see it just kind of breaks up into 4 saws like that. And these center points can be really nice sweet spots for an FM setup. So we can start, for example, by getting ourselves a basic shapes over here so that it's nice and easy. And I will just FM this from oscillator 2. Let's turn down any phase randomization here. And now we get something like this. And as you can imagine, we can change the phase as well to maybe get a slightly different tone. Here we almost get like a talking effect. Maybe if we combine the FM amount as well as the wavetable position, maybe like this. As you can imagine, it's just nice to experiment around with different kind of ways of modulating, different directions of modulations, that kind of stuff. I'll give this a little bit of unison. Let's turn this down actually. Of course, because we've given it voices, let's turn on the phase randomization on this one. We can also experiment by using maybe a slightly more complex wave over here. I like how with the square wave we get nice digital sounds. Might be cool to run a bandpass over this kind of stuff here. Let's maybe go sine interpolate and then sync it to the project so that we can play multiple notes. Okay, just for triggering, I'm going to copy over the settings that I have over here. That means that we can also use the velocity, because that is now slightly randomized by the randomizer. So let's use that on something fun like a phase disperse here. Let's just have it slightly go up. We get some cool stuff out of that. I think for this kind of digital sound, it would be nice to use something like downsampling. I don't like that sometimes the note just sounds very noisy. I don't know if there's a way to get rid of that, or if this is a byproduct of our particular setup over here. What we could try, but I think this is going to fail, is to make it a little bit more complex. Sometimes that works. We have this 3 graces over here. Let's see what happens if we maybe do something like this. We can even use RM over here. Oh, so this needs to be oscillator 3, and this needs to be oscillator 2. Maybe have this one an octave up together with this one here. Maybe just gets too noisy in those very high frequencies over there, so let's keep this a little bit lower. And now to finalize this pack, let's add some delay. Going to go 1/8 dotted ping pong. And we're just going to focus on like the mid-range frequencies. I really don't want the tone that is generated from the downsampling to be delayed, basically. And then we'll add a reverb. I believe having the RM a little bit lower is going to give us more variety in the tone, because I feel like with it higher, it always has the same sound. Yeah, maybe just having it an octave higher instead of using the RM is better. 3 just keeps its vowel-y texture more, and I think I resolved that issue that we had with it sounding very noisy. So now, of course, what we could do is we could take that modulation that we had before for macro 1 here and just copy that over. Of course, you would write in the automation that you want for it in an actual production, but for now I'm a little bit too lazy. So now you have something that sounds like this. So that's going to be it for today. As you can see, experimenting with this kind of FM can be very fun, and there's a lot of different unique sounds that you can get out of it. So hopefully this video is just going to inspire you to experiment a little bit with it and find some cool sounds. But that's going to be it. If you want to use these two patches, they're of course going to be available up on my Patreon page. And supporting me on Patreon will get you other benefits as well, like early access to videos, priority in feedback streams, and for the highest tiers, a written detailed feedback on one track per month. Another great way to support the channel is by watching some more of my content, so I'll leave 2 videos up on the screen that might be of your interest. So just pick one and enjoy, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.